Okay, with that, we welcome Quentin Palfrey to our meeting. We met Quentin 4 years ago when he was a candidate for lieutenant governor. He's been to our meetings in person at that time, and so we did a lot of knocking on doors and talking to people. Unfortunately, that didn't go the way we wanted, but we have looks like a likely AG race. We're still waiting for Maura Healey to announce. I'm hoping that she does so shortly. And so Quentin, please feel the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself. We have a lot of new members who may not have met you 4 years ago, and talk about your candidacy, and then maybe if you have time, do some Q&A with us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. I wish we were all together in person, but it's nice to be back with you in Braintree. And it's great to look around the Zoom and see so many friendly faces and so many people who are so helpful in 2018. So I really appreciate everything you did when I was the Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor. As Kathleen mentioned, I'm planning to run for Attorney General, if but only if Maura Healey does not run for re-election as AG. I got to know the AG office very well when I was the chief of the healthcare division. I was there at the time when we were implementing Massachusetts landmark health reform legislation, and I founded a new division that still stands today. We were one of the main consumer voices in that health reform conversation, with a particular focus on vulnerable populations, looking at racial disparities. We also brought consumer protection litigation against some unscrupulous health insurance companies that were exploiting vulnerable populations, and got some significant recoveries for Massachusetts residents, and were able to push some of those insurance companies out of the market, so I had an opportunity to see firsthand how impactful the office can be. I've also had the opportunity and the honor to work in the White House under President Barack Obama. And most recently, on day one of the Biden-Harris administration, I joined as the acting general counsel of the Commerce Department. So there I led a team of about 400 lawyers to help launch the Build Back Better agenda, and also played a role in overseeing the legal issues of the US Census, which were very badly mismanaged by the Trump administration. And I'll tell you, when I think about the Trump administration, the main thing that comes to mind is just the cruelty of the political environment, ripping apart families and trying to put walls between us and our neighbors, trying to knock tens of millions of people off of health insurance. But there's also been this attack on the fundamental underpinnings of our democracy. They don't believe in truth, they don't believe in science, they attack our Constitution, they attack our democracy. And I think we've really struggled with what to do about this moment in our American history. We've made some progress. It's really a relief to have some sanity in the White House and to have narrow majorities in both houses of Congress. President Biden immediately rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement. For as long as we have it in place, the child tax credit has cut child poverty almost in half. I think this infrastructure bill is going to have a really big effect on jobs, on transportation, on the transition to a clean energy economy. But Washington is broken. And I think we'd be foolish to look to Congress for the solutions to the really big problems we face: racial injustice, the climate crisis, attacks on our democracy, attacks on reproductive rights, gun violence. For the solutions to the really big problems we face, I think we're going to have to look to the states. And Massachusetts has this wonderful tradition of leadership. The Constitution was born here. We were at the heart of the abolitionist movement. We led the way on equal marriage. We led the way on universal access to healthcare. And I think the time has come for Massachusetts to lead again. And as a former assistant attorney general, I've seen firsthand how much impact the people's lawyer can have on the issues that affect us every day. So the AG can bring consumer protection cases against predatory lenders, against scammers, against pharmaceutical companies, as in the case of the opioid crisis in the Sackler family. The AG can bring much needed urgency to racial injustice. You know, the George Floyd murder and the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict are just the most recent reminders that we have two justice systems in America. We imprison too many people for too long for doing too little. Race has too much to do with who ends up in the criminal justice system. The AG can bring much needed urgency to the climate crisis, to the fight against the climate crisis. You know, this is the thing that's going to determine the kind of life that our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren live. We've seen recently how hard it's going to be to get leadership at the international and the national level, but the AG can have a really big impact on the climate crisis. We need urgency in the fight for workers' rights against wage theft and attacks by Uber and Lyft on benefits and worker classification. We need urgency in standing up for reproductive rights. You know, Roe is in deep, deep trouble. And the US Supreme Court and states across the country, reproductive rights are under attack. We need urgency in the fight against gun violence. On the issue that I've spent a lot of my career on, which is the issue of voting rights, our democracy is under attack, and we need the states to lead the way on standing up for democracy. So I don't know what's going to happen in the gubernatorial race. I do think that there's a chance that there's going to be an open seat. But I do know the kind of race that I want to run. And that's the kind of race where you lead from the grassroots, where you respect and empower and include people in communities all over the Commonwealth. And I'd love to have your support at the caucuses next month, at the convention, and the statewide primary. You know, when I was thinking about running for office the last time, there were these awful events in Charlottesville. Since then, we've seen children in cages. We've seen collusion between the Oval Office and foreign adversaries. We've seen an armed mob attack our Congress as they were in the process of trying to have a peaceful transition of power. And I think we need to ask ourselves, what are we going to tell our children and our grandchildren that we did in this moment when our American values were so obviously under attack? And I want to be able to say we stood up and we fought back. We pounded our fists on the table and we screamed till we were hoarse that this isn't the kind of America we want to live in. So I'd love to have your support. I'd love to join with you to build a grassroots movement from Braintree to the Berkshires to take back our democracy and to lead on the issues that affect people every day. So I'm Quentin Palfrey. I'd love to have your support. I hope there are a few minutes for a few questions.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask Quentin?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, Quentin, thanks for coming. My question to you is, what policies of Maura Healey do you admire and would like to continue? And what areas do you think could have been pursued better and that you would move differently?
Sure, thanks for that question. So first of all, I think Maura's been a terrific Attorney General. I think that in many ways, the office has really ascended in its impact during the last few years. I think that she has used the office in a wonderfully effective way to fight back against a number of really misguided policies at the federal level. She's shown real leadership on gun violence, on some really important consumer protection issues. I think she's been a terrific AG, and we had an opportunity to work together. I was the chief of the healthcare division at the time that she was the chief of the civil rights division. And so we worked together on a number of cases at the intersection of those issues. And my wife, Anne, actually worked as an assistant AG in the civil rights division when she was the chief. So I have a huge amount of admiration for the way that she has run the office and the impact that it's had during that time. I think that some of the issues that we're going to face in 2023 and beyond are a little different from what we've seen over the last few years. First and foremost, we're not fighting against the Trump administration. We need to be ready if that is the case in the future, or similarly misguided federal policies come into play. But I think we need to recenter our focus on the set of issues that I outlined in my remarks. I certainly think racial injustice is one of the great issues of our time, and something that we need the office to focus on being a voice for reform. I think the climate crisis is an area where we need urgency at every level of government, but where the AG office is particularly well suited to be a leader. And on the issue of democracy, I think that this is a very dangerous moment in American history. And I think that we need to keep voting rights at the center of our advocacy, both here at home and across the country. And so I'd like to bring some of my experience on those sets of issues to bear on that. But I think she's been a terrific AG, and I think that in many ways it would be trying to build on a really impressive legacy.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, John.
One complaint about Maura Healey. Well, two things. Comment, you're talking more about federal matters rather than Massachusetts matters as an AG, but you're running as a state AG. No other comment. Secondly, the complaints against Maura Healey is about public corruption in Massachusetts, and she has a questionable, or in some cases even a weak policy in regard to public corruption in Massachusetts. What's your opinion or comments about that?
So I think that we're at a moment when faith in government is at a low ebb. And I think that it is really important for the AG to be a watchdog of the public trust. And I think that's true both at the municipal level, where we've seen problems and misconduct that I think the AG can play a role in resolving, but also at the statewide level. And I would like to see greater urgency and greater oversight for the state police, for the MBTA, for a number of state agencies. I think the AG has a role in making sure that people can trust what people who serve them in government are doing. There's a role for the auditor and the IG and others as well, for the legislature. But I do think that there needs to be more oversight, and there needs to be an aggressive approach there. And I have some recent muscle memory in this kind of a role, because on January 20th, I was the chief legal officer of the Commerce Department. At that moment, I was the highest ranking political appointee in the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we inherited everything the Trump administration had done in all of those agencies. And I had to look under all of these rocks and see all the nasty, squirrely things come out from under them and try and disentangle them. But I think it's really important for the public trust that we take a hard look at accountability, and that we make sure that the public can trust that what folks are doing is in their best interest. So I do think that's an area where we should be aggressive.
Thank you. We have Elizabeth, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. Let's see, my screen has moved around here. I want to look at you while I'm talking. Thank you so much for being here tonight. One of the things that you've said that I think is really important is around, doing the people's business and carrying on for the people's business. And what we have here in this local area, in the Fall River Basin area, is a giant compressor station that was built. It was built during COVID. Prior to it being built, there was documentation about the cumulative impact of all of these poisons and toxins in our air, but it was built anyway through a number of failures at the top, and as well as some fairly underhanded maneuvers of designating the workers as essential workers to continue building this through the pandemic. So now the response to a lot of public officials is it's built. So, sorry, it's built. But this has all happened right in front of us. And the Attorney General has certainly done wonderful things in other areas that you've mentioned. But in this particular area, she did not protect the people. And she continues, the people have had to hire attorneys in order to protect ourselves. And in some cases, fight the government that is supposed to be protecting us. So what do we do with that?
So I have been a longtime critic of the compressor station, and would love to strategize with you how we can use the AG office as an ally in that fight. I think that it has been a debacle and an area where we need to figure out strategies for pushing back. But I'd love to be educated on, what are the opportunities, what are our authorities, how can we be an ally in that fight? But certainly I've been a longtime critic of the compressor station.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. John Dennehy, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thanks, Kathy. Quentin, thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate your comments. You made an interesting point, I think a pretty valid one, about us not being able to rely on Congress to make a lot of the important decisions that need to be made in the coming years. We've seen an increase in regional cooperation among attorney generals throughout the country, particularly in the area of voting rights this year. What do you see as the future of regional cooperation? And as Attorney General, how do you see yourself working with other New England states or other states across the country in promoting some of these important issues that Congress is not working on? Because it seems like if the states rise up collectively and if the attorneys general speak as one, we might have a better chance. But what do you see as the future of regional cooperation? Thank you.
I think it's a really important strategy. I think the attorneys general have sort of come of age in the last couple of decades and have sort of learned some of the levers, some of the ways that when we band together, we can have a lot more impact. When I was in the office, I was one of the lead attorneys in a multi-state insurance investigation that recovered about $175 million for a group of people across the country, and had an opportunity to kind of see how you can kind of use those levers. We've definitely seen that in a number of areas, that if you want to take on a big bank or a big pharmaceutical company, the Trump administration, the kinds of adversaries that individual states are sometimes nervous about bringing litigation against, because you can kind of get bogged down in it, and you can only do one thing if they're 15, 20, 30 of your states, then you have a lot more leverage. And if you have to go forward with the litigation, you can share those burdens. So I think that's one of the ways that AGs have become much more effective. And I think, unfortunately, there are not a lot of other levers. With filibuster, with Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, things aren't going to get better at the national level, unfortunately, in the next cycle. And so you're talking about next best options. And when you're talking about next best options, multi-state attorney general actions are one of the better options out there for some of the things that we're talking about: voting rights, gun violence, some big consumer protection cases, even some of these sort of structural issues in our economy. I think that the AG's offices have shown that they can punch above their weight. And I think that we need to use those levers.
Great. Thank you, Quentin. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask Quentin a question before he heads off? I know he's had a very busy day today. We're not the only group on his list, I'm sure.
So tonight we have been in Mendon and Arlington, in Braintree, and where else did I go? So yes, it's
It's been a very busy time, and we really do appreciate your coming and spending the time talking with us and answering our questions. And we wish you the best of luck. We're glad to see that you're in the race again. Again, if you need help with collecting signatures for your nomination papers or anything else, feel free to reach out to us. Our caucus is going to be a virtual caucus on February 9th. So, I mean, there's a lot of time between February 9th and the convention to persuade our delegates to support you. So, so we wish you the very best of luck, and thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having me. I will put in the chat my website, my personal email, my cell phone. Would love to hear from folks. If anybody wants to volunteer for the campaign, we're trying to do this in a really grassroots, neighbor to neighbor kind of way. So I'd love it if you'd be willing to send a few emails or make a few phone calls on our behalf. Otherwise, hope we'll have a chance to come in person and say hello again soon. But it's really nice to be back among friends and appreciate the chance to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.